No,
I can't remember. I knew somebody had a conflict, so I had to be. Okay. If you want to do it, go for it. Like I said, yeah, because you already had it. It's, it's just everybody like wants. Well, we can try and make somebody else work, so you can go see the city.
hello there. I'm just getting what you said. No. stuff, but when we switch to like new drafts, I'll try to come in at that point. If you need me, just ping me on Slack or something, and I can download them. I think you could do it. It doesn't change anything if I say it, but you know exactly what's going on. Yeah.
We have a big box in this room. All right, I'll be on the.
Okay, hello everybody. I think remote people heard already half of our conversation here at the front desk because the mic was on the whole time. But hopefully there was some entertainment for you. Um, Welcome everybody to the IAB Open meeting. We have 1 hour today, and my name is Mia Kulewind.
Jared Mach, outgoing IAB.
I'm the IAB chair, in case you don't know yet. Let's go to the next slide. This is a completely expected slide. It's a note well. I hope you've seen this already. I hope you know what's on there. If not, please make yourself familiar with that. This is the rules, how we work together and contribute here in the IETF. There's also a link to the code of conduct. So this is also something that I would like to have everybody on their mind, that we work together in a constructive and friendly way in this meeting and in all other meetings. Okay, what is IAB Open? Maybe you have an idea about this because you are already in the room. But our idea about this is that we as the IAB really want to have some interchange with the community. We would like to give you a good impression about what we're doing, especially from the technical point of view. And I just lost connectivity, but you're fine. Okay. From a technical point of view, you can stick with the previous slide. But we're also looking for actually getting feedback from you and having exchange and communication with the communities. So thank you for being here. Next slide. This is also mainly kind of for the proceedings, just to make sure beyond this session that you know how to interact with us. We have a couple of mailing lists. The easiest way to reach the IAB is just send an email to the IAB. Be aware that this mailing list has a few more people than just the core IAB, so that's why this is listed on here. You can also send an email to me or any IAB member individually. If you want like an open mailing list with community discussion, it's best to go to Architecture Discuss. This is also hosted by the IAB, and we use it for various cases. There's a bunch of mailing lists for, not a bunch because we only have 2 programs. There's our programs related mailing list for more specific topics. And if you have any kind of questions, feedback, or other things related to liaisons, we have an own mailing list there. That's the easiest way to reach the right people in the IAB. Okay, next slide. Okay, now we're starting a little bit of just like an official reporting about what we're doing in terms of documents, workshops, and programs. And I will start with this slide on the documents we are working on or what we have published recently. So we did publish 1 RFC since the last meeting. That was a lot of discussion about this was in the EDM program, but it was also presented in this IAB Open meeting at some point, I think. So that's out and published. We adopted a new document in the IAB since the last meeting. That's the IAB Pass Signals Collaboration Draft. And there's some discussion ongoing on the architecture discussion list. So if you're interested in that work, that's the right mailing list, and we're happy to get your feedback on this. There is the output of the RFC editor program, which is ready to be published. And I will say more about this on one of the next slides. And there is one document which is under discussion by the EDM program. This is already an IAB document which has been around for more than 2 years, I think, but it hasn't made a lot of progress, but there's some work on this going on again, so hopefully we can publish that at some point. There's one new workshop report, and we will hear about this next, and there's an update on the workshop report from our workshop last summer about network measurements, or network quality measurements, I guess. Yeah, program updates. So we have 2 to 3 technical programs, I would say. Sure. Let's try it this way. We have 2 to 3 technical programs. One of them is EDM. They presented a lot of their discussion and work over the last couple of IAB open meetings, and this time we only have a quick one slide update. So as I just mentioned, RFC 9170 is published, and that was discussed and worked in this program. And there was an interim meeting of this program beginning of February where they talked about this related implementation tag. So that's something that is already in the data tracker, and you can use it in order to make it easier to find related implementations, code for interrupt testing and these kind of things. So this is something new in the data tracker that came out of the discussion of the program. And then they are working on this other draft about protocol maintenance that I was also mentioning early on. So if you have any input on this second draft here, then this the program and the program writing list is the right place to go. The Internet Threat Model Program. Yari, are you with us online? Do you want to unmute yourself and say something?
I am. Thank you.
Perfect.
So this is a program looking at the changes on the threat models in the internet. We had an interim meeting after the previous IETF. We've had actually 3 documents being updated since last time. There's been some discussion on mailing list, not a huge amount, but some. And I think we're converging on trying to publish a couple of documents on we call principles or documents describing principles around data minimization and involvement of intermediaries. But work remains on that. And also we have a bigger question of, do we actually want to update the official IETF threat model, which the IAB to begin with cannot do, and exactly to what lengths shall we go to do that, and so on. That still remains to be decided. You can participate in the discussion on the mailing list. The link is here, and we have a poll for the next meeting time up on the mailing list right now. So planning to do that in the next couple of weeks. That's it.
Thanks, Yari. Okay, and then our third program, and I cannot see any screen. This one. Yeah, now I can see it. So our third program, this is a little bit a different program. That's an IB program, but it was really run like an open working group for everybody to participate, and we left the process on their own. We're just committed to host that and take their output. And the good news is, and I already announced this in the plenary yesterday, but just to spread the news a little bit more, the program basically concluded their work. So they finished the draft and they headed back to the IAB for IAB approval. The IAB made a 4 weeks community last call in order to reach out to more of the community, get different reviews in, and we triggered a lot of reviews and got some final feedback, made mostly editorial small changes. So we're very confident that this is in a good shape now, and we are ready to publish that basically. There is a dependency from the model itself to 3 other drafts, which are on the IETF stream and which are updates to existing process documents. These have already been on the IESG agenda, but then we discovered like a small update that is still needed to the IAB charter. So this update to the IAB charter goes through another IETF working group, not working group, last call, IETF last call. And as soon as, and will also get additional approval by ISOC, by the ISOC board, because they approved the IAB charter in the first place. So we asked them to take a look at this again, just to check in with everybody who could be related here. But as soon as that document is ready, basically the whole set of documents is ready. The whole set of, why is that working? Yeah, okay. Something just changed. I don't know what. Maybe they did, okay. So the whole set of documents should be ready and go out very soon in a few weeks. So at this point, it's merely a thank you to everybody who was involved, especially the chairs, the editor, but also everybody who provided feedback in the mailing list, was involved in the discussion and provided reviews. Thank you very much. This was a lot of effort, But at the end, we managed to work together productively and I think got a good output here. Yeah, and then we will close down the program at some point. Okay, Liaison updates. Not sure, Wes, if you want to take this one, if you are here. Yes.
I am here and I agreed to do it, so I should do it. So as everybody may remember, the IEB is responsible for the liaison outreach, or at least overseeing the liaison outreaches to a lot of other standards organizations. We created a liaison coordinator role in the last year, and Tommy and I have been fulfilling that role. I will step down and Deborah will actually take over. But this is essentially the liaison updates for what has happened at least recently since the last IETF. It is worth noting that in the future, we actually hope to have sort of more mini presentations in the IAB Open meeting, or something we've been discussing lately. So if you're interested in hearing more about a particular standards organization or other, we may start dedicating some time. We'd love your feedback on that. The multi-stakeholder platform on ICT standardization is up for renewal. We need to fill that role. The ICANN SSEC has published 113, which calls for the ICANN board to ensure a DNS label is reserved for private use. This has been heavily discussed in the past in DNSOP and in other places as well. The IETF has the oversight of special uses names, and there's a lack of clarity on exactly who should be creating a name that might be used for private label space in the same way that we have private address space. There exists nothing at the moment, and a lot of companies and organizations squat on names. So look forward to discussions on that, both within ICANN and the IETF. Stuart, did you have a question related to liaisons?
Just wanted to mention that the DRIP working group is probably going to need some help establishing liaison with ASTM International and the International Civil Aviation Organization.
Okay, great. Why don't you write the IAB with a note of what you think you need and things like that, and then we will certainly reach out to you. So, but go ahead and write IAB@iab.org, and we'll all get to see it. So. You can write the liaison coordinators directly if you want to, but for something like that, we're going to have a discussion anyway, so you might as well write the entire IAB. The ICANN Root Server System Advisory Committee, which is RSAC, is seeking information on their plans in order to publish the ZoneMD record, which is a record designed within the IETF for providing a checksum on the entire root zone content, so that you can be aware that you got the entire file, as well as there's no missing records in the entire thing for large-scale data transfers, used especially in things like RFC 8806, which is a local copy of the root zone, for example, to ensure that you have a complete file. It's used well in conjunction with DNSSEC. It's not a replacement for it. And then RSEC 058 is success criteria for the root server system governance model, which a while ago ICANN took on the role of. Right now, the root server system consists of 12 organizations that don't have an overarching governance model over them, and then ICANN has been thinking for a number of years now about how to create such a thing, and they created the GWG. Ted Hardy and Jeff Houston have been our IAB liaisons to the GWG. Ted, unfortunately, has to step down. He actually has been the chair of the GWG and has done an excellent job, and we certainly thank Ted for his service. We are looking for a replacement. The deadline for volunteering for such a role is Monday, April 4th. 2022, obviously, so please do consider volunteering for that role if you have interest in overseeing and helping create sort of the next root server system governance model. Any questions? Barry.
This is Barry Lieba. I'm on SSAC and was in the work party that developed SAC 113. I just wanted to clarify something, because it's my understanding from what we wrote that this is not in the IETF's territory anymore, that the IETF clearly said you didn't want to go there. So this is just a request to the ICANN board to take care of this. So I'm sure there'll still be discussions within the IETF, but I don't think anybody's asking the IETF to take any action at this point. Is that your understanding as well?
That is my understanding. That being said, the ICANN board has actually talked to the IAB about getting advice on how to do this sort of thing. So there still is sort of some confusion in terms of what the ICANN board can do without the IETF's help, even if it's not in the IETF's bailiwick. It's a weird problem.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
Yeah, we could discuss that all day, as you well know. Liman.
So Lars Lehmann here from NetNode, one of the root server operators and also a member of the DWG from the root server side. The Root Service System Advisory Committee in ICANN asked the ICANN board to create this working group and asked it specifically to be very inclusive, because the root server operators per se did not want to create their own future. They didn't want to be kingmakers of themselves. So therefore we reached out to a wider community, and there is a lot of representation inside the ICANN community itself. But there are also certain aspects, especially the technical ones, where we would value the input from the technical community. Even if it's not more than sitting there with your foot on the brake pedal when we're heading in the totally wrong directions, that would be valuable in itself. So please consider applying for this position, and please help us to maintain a relationship with the technical community. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Liman. Very well put. Full disclosure, I'm a root server operator too for USCISI. One other point of comment, which is that whatever comes out of the GWG will be a public document published by ICANN, and that will mean that it will go through a comment period. And as Liman just indicated, the wider review of such a document, the better. So, with that, I believe I'm done with this slide.
Thank you. So that is the reporting part here, and we can start with the fun part. We have one more report, sorry, but maybe a more detailed one about our last workshop on analyzing IETF data, and Niels will take this. And then the rest of the session, we have some time to discuss about centralization. That is a topic that comes up very often. And there's a lot of community interest. It's also a topic that's discussed a lot in the IAB, and we have like a couple of small presentations to kind of set the stage, but hopefully we'll have enough time for community discussion after the presentations. Yes, Niels, great to have you here. You can take over.
Okay, let me try. I have to share slides.
We have your slides already? No.
Yeah, but Jared is controlling them still.
Yeah,
Oh, I can do now too. Never mind.
Okay.
Hello all, and hello from sunny Amsterdam, not too far. I'm here to report back on the Analyzing IETF Data workshop that we held already in November, December last year. It was hosted at the University of Amsterdam with a program committee of Colin Perkins, Corinne Kath, Mirja Kulewind, Senbin Lee, and Wes Hardeker. Our question was, there is a wealth of IETF data, but how can this be used to improve the IETF processes, create better standards that see more implementation, aid IETF leadership, authors and community members, and increase IETF legitimacy? And as a subsidiary objective, how to create a community around the people that use this data, create tooling, and make it accessible for more people. And we did not come up on this on the fly, because also in the IETF Administrative Strategic Plan, it says that increasingly data should inform policy making. And so what we did is that we organized a hackathon, which unfortunately due to COVID was not on site, but was online. We had a 4-day workshop, out of which 2 were a hackathon, also inspired on the experiences we had at the IETF with the hackathon, but thus far that wasn't done during an IAB workshop. So on the first day and the last day, we had sessions, but on the middle 2 days, we worked in distributed groups on different issues, of which I will give a short overview, very short. So first we gave an overview of all the IETF data sources that there are, such as the mailing list archives, the RFC index, the data tracker, and Robert Sparks was there as well, also provided an excellent overview and shared some notes that are definitely very useful to review if you want to have a look at this. The IETF org webpage visitor stats, GitHub and interop testings and survey data, but this could also be combined with data of other SDOs to provide more insights. And then the tools to analyze this, there are some really interesting tools that are linked in the slides. The IETF data library, as it has been developed by Colin Perkins, his team and his projects. The Big Bang project, that's been on this for a while. RFC Prolog database, and of course, Yariarkos author stats and IETF document statistics. So there's a lot of data and a lot of tools to work with, but also a lot of things that we don't use and don't know yet. So that was also a part of trying to understand what do we know, what can we do, and what is lacking. In the first session, we observed and tried to understand affiliations in industry control and standardization, try to understand what are the relations between corporate interest and individual contributions, and competitions between leadership. And that really flowed up super nicely in the hackathon on work done on initial analysis on affiliation trends in mailing list participation, a lot of work done on stakeholder analysis, stakeholder categories and groups, and initial comparison between IETF and 3GPP data. So that resulted in some new data models, in some handpicking of top contributors to several mailing lists, to set a bit of a gold standard. Then work by Nick Doty to see if that could also be done in an automated fashion and compare the hand-coded one with the automated coded one. And then some work by Sebastian Benthal to see if from mailing list data, we could actually retrieve affiliation and then compare that also with data tracker data and the hand-picked data. So there was a lot of collaboration going on and working there. And then we could actually use that data on 3GPP data. So that was really, and this was the work done by Christoph Becker. So it's really interesting how this opened this work on IETF data, also opened insight into other standards bodies. Then another session was on community and diversity, asking who is in the IETF, who is not there, what is the existing diversity, can trends and reasons for that be found in data, and what could be different if diversity had been stronger. So in the discussions and hacking, we looked at what could be measured and what cannot be in existing tools, but also in current NLP approaches, the studying of gender identification, country region participation and tenure, and considerations of privacy and ethics. And initial results showed different kinds of participation in different groups, confirmed something that we already know about a lack of diversity during several meetings. And then another session looked at the publication process and decision making, especially how decisions are made at the IETF, how can these decisions be studied, and how can these be used to improve decision making and also help authors and leadership make better choices, and to lead to how can we make better input and output documents, to understand who writes the RFCs and how does this contribute to them passing, try to understand doing data-driven mining of homophilic users, requirements of natural language processing to understand the decision-making process, deployment measurement, of course, so how does the relationship between a successful RFC and its deployment, and measuring efficiency of RFC development process. So what are common delays, and also when does working group last call take place? Also, there was some really interesting work being done there, and what I think are the most, and then some really interesting work on environmental sustainability, on which not a lot of hacking has been done, but some really interesting papers were presented on actually the lack of discussion of sustainability in IETF drafts, but also the CO2 emissions of IETF meetings and how these could or should be taken into consideration with the environmental crisis right ahead of us. So some observations is that there was really well attended. The papers were really good, were really a pleasure to read, and the participation was extremely diverse. IAB members, IETF leadership, social scientists, data scientists, computer scientists, and the mix of sessions and the hackathon worked really well. So there were new collaborations, code and tool chains were tried and tested, and people are now using each other's code to write papers and do things, and new research questions have been developed. And I think that's really nice. So this also provided for us for a basis of a research agenda for IETF data to inform future research and development. There are people working in different new collaborations, working on new papers and new workshops. But because it was so well and this brought together such a unique group, we have a follow-up workshop under discussion on this topic, but that needs further understanding of who can organize what, how the pandemic is developing, because it would be really nice to do it in person, and further discussions with IAB leadership. So if you want to have a thorough look at who did what during the workshop, please have a look at the papers, but also at the slides that were presented during the sessions, but also the outcomes of the hackathon. I'll also have slides, and these can be found on GitHub. We have a draft report there. It's a 0-0, but here's the link to the GitHub, so you can have PRs and comments, etc. And there is also a video recording of the whole workshop. So if I missed anything, please, other program committee members of people who participate, please add. Or if there are any questions, I'm happy to seek to answer them or answer them together with other people who were present. Thanks so much. That was it from me.
Yeah, thank you, Niels. And yeah, this was really nice to see. This was the first time we had an IB workshop with a hackathon component, and there was a lot of work going on. So really nice workshop, I think. And we have somebody in the queue, Elliot.
Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to colleagues. Niels, thanks for the update on this workshop. I saw a lot of slides go by that explained what transpired at the workshop and what the next steps were. I wonder if you or other people who participated could take just a moment and provide maybe your top 2 or 3 insights in terms of what you learned about how we participate, or what was confirmed, or what misconceptions people had that the data bore out not to be true. Could you comment on that?
Yes, but unfortunately not with a full answer, because people came in with different research interests and different questions. And I think where we focused on was trying to understand the data and the issues people are working on, to have an understanding of the problem and understand how the things could be approached. So we were by no means in these days to a full understanding of particular issues, and I wouldn't want to talk for other participants to say what are the conclusions of that workshop. That was definitely not the nature of the workshop. It was the first time we did this. So I think like establishing a community, establishing a research agenda, establishing research questions, and it would be way too early to say we would have answers to them. But what could be said is that some of the code is now being used to try if we could generate dashboard kind of features, similar such to the ones author stats and document stats is doing. And a bit more of an web interface to do data science on mailing lists and standards. But that is also all future work. So it sparked a lot of interesting things, but answers are not done.
Yeah, Lars, I would second it. So I participated in this workshop as an individual, I guess, and it was very much like a workshop with the emphasis on the work part, right? So this is not like where you see a joint statement come out at the end or something. So this was about getting people together, oftentimes for the first time, and trying to understand what everybody like has as an interest and has as data and has as motivation. And I kind of expect this will be sort of an ongoing thing in some way. And I don't know if it's always going to be an IAB workshop or if there's some other way to continue this, but it's certainly not done after this one event, right? But it's really helpful, putting the leadership cap on, to have actually data about a bunch of stuff, especially during COVID, where it's sort of very difficult to get a sense from the community because there's no physical meeting where you bump into people and it'll tell you things, right? So we're trying to get some insight into what we should do in terms of decisions through efforts like this. Thanks for organizing.
Hello, this is Shane. This is very cool. I wonder if during the work if there was a lot of attention given to areas where it was difficult to extract information out of the data that you have? Like, is part of the intention to make recommendations for additional metadata or additional data for researchers or other people?
Excellent question. So what I think was the preliminary analysis is that data tracker, very nice. Mailing lists, very hard, very messy. But what is the advantage of mailing lists is that many other organizations also have mailing lists, and many other organizations don't have data tracker. So that makes then comparison harder. But then we could try to see if we can enhance the mailing list data with the data tracker data, and then see if we can thus improve our whole thing. There was also talk and discussion in some presentations on knowledge graphs and how machine learning can inform this process, but that was still also a presentation about how many things did not work as well as people hoped. So so that continues to be work. There is a thing, of course, also in the data tracker that many things are text fields and not drop down. So you have many different ways of even just spelling Cisco systems, Cisco with capitals, you know. So and so there were challenges. And what was so nice is that Robert and others were there. So it really felt like we were hacking on a common problem. So it didn't feel like research community needed to request leadership to tell the tools people. No, it was like we were really like trying to understand and wrapping our head around where we're going, what we're missing, what we have.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Niels. Yeah, we now have like 4 small presentations. Let's take the presentations and then have the discussion afterwards, because we're already a little bit behind time. But I'm actually not sure for this presentation if either Matt or Carl is in the room. I didn't see them in the list. Yeah, so then we actually we gained some time. But on that presentation, so that is work from ISOC that did some market analysis about centralization. And as we don't have the presenters here, it's probably much easier for you to just go on the ISOC webpage and look at all the data there firsthand. It's very interesting, and it definitely does contribute to this discussion. Okay, then, no, this is the wrong presentation. The next should be from Viet, who also did some measurements. So let's start with that part.
Yes, hello everyone. I think I still need control over the slides.
You can hand it over to him if you work for anything.
Okay,
perfect. Now you should have control. Nice to have you here.
Exactly, cool, thanks, perfect. So yeah, hello everyone, my name is Viet from Technical University of Munich, and today I have the honor to present our measurement study on web consolidation here at the IAB Open Meeting. This paper is co-authored by Roland, Oliver, Vipaf, and was recently published in TOIT. You can find a link to the paper and all the measurement-related material on our GitHub repository, as well as contact information in case you have any questions. So, as already mentioned before, in the recent years, you've probably also seen that there has been increasing demand for measurement studies on internet centralization in particular. Why is that? Essentially because there are differing opinions and views about centralization. On the one hand, centralization obviously facilitates the deployment of new protocols. On the other hand, it makes it somewhat risky for privacy and is a concentration of control, which is obviously not a good thing in a lot of ways. And that, in a sense, also makes it difficult to define centralization and to understand and assess the extent and implications of centralization. In the recent years, there have been some studies on centralization, on DNS, third-party dependencies, and co-location of services. And in our paper in particular, we look at web consolidation around what we call content delivery infrastructures, which is basically a term which subsumes CDN and cloud hosts under one term, CDIs for short. So what we first did in our paper is we looked at longitudinal DNS measurements for all domains in the .com, .net, and .org namespaces, which were more than 160 million. and we found that the CDI penetration has increased from roughly 8% to nearly double, with 15% in 2020. 15% in this case means that 15% of the websites that we looked at out of all the measured ones were hosted on a CDI. And note that the CDI identification is obviously not an exhaustive identification, but it covers most of the prominent providers that are out there. So this can be seen as a lower bound, one could say. In the next part, we then looked at popular landing pages based on the Alexa top 1 million top list, and see that the overall penetration is roughly 24% over IPv4 and roughly 12% over IPv6, with more popular domains obviously having a higher penetration, since these websites are simply facing more traffic and are in more need of this infrastructure, so to speak. In the bottom plot, you can see the contribution of providers, in this case, only the top providers in this case, to the overall penetration. And you can see that it's only a handful of providers that make up the most amount of contribution to this overall penetration, in particular over IPv6, where we see that, for instance, for the Alexa top 100,000 for IPv6, Cloudflare contributes roughly 80% of the pages of all CDI hosted pages. So while there is some concentration that you can see there, it definitely helps with, in this case, pushing IPv6. We then also went beyond landing pages, where we looked at page resources. For that, we used page load measurements from the HTTP archive, which covered more than 4 million websites and roughly 400 million resources. And we saw that roughly 1/3 of the pages were hosted on a CDI. And in contrast, more than 50% of the resources that were loaded together with the pages were actually coming from a CDI. In the top table right here, you can see that Google and Amazon in particular account for together more than 50% of the CDI hosted resources. So while more than half of the resources in total come from a CDI, more than 50% only come from Google and Amazon in particular. So there's definitely some, you could say, top heavy distribution there. In the bottom table, you can also see the penetration by resource type, which is especially high for static resources, which is sort of expected, since CDNs in particular are used for distribution of static resources a lot. However, we see, for instance, that fonts have 86% of a CDI penetration, which is definitely a very high number. And in our paper, we also cover case studies on CDI penetration, which is also similarly high for ads and trackers and for TLS 1.3 support. To briefly conclude this, as mentioned, this is just a brief overview of our paper. We have seen that the consolidation of web pages around certain CDIs has increased by roughly double since 2015, and that most of the resources are delivered from just a handful of CDIs mostly. This obviously also means that there are some risks with this, but on the other hand, it also helps with the deployment and support of IPv6 and TLS 1.3, as we've briefly shown. Also, as mentioned before, there was quite some discussion on the architecture discuss mailing list, which I definitely recommend you to have a look into if you're more interested in that. I've put some of the, I guess, main questions and comments from the discussion here on the slide. And I guess the most important or most interesting one would be, what is the impact of and on IETF activities around all this centralization? And I believe Mark has some comments on this on the next talk. So unless there are any questions, I would conclude here.
Yeah, we have somebody in the queue, but I would actually like to go through the other presentations quickly, and then we take the questions. So Christian, just stay in the queue, and then you can just unmute yourself when there's a question coming up anytime later.
Okay, perfect. Thanks.
Thank you. No, sorry. And then, okay, Mark. Yeah, you are up, and you should be able to move your slide.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, how do I control these slides? Oh, I see. Interesting. Okay. Weird. Okay. I don't think I'm going to need 10 minutes here, but we'll see. So this is just a quick update on a draft I've been working on for a little while. Draft Nottingham Avoiding Internet Centralization, although the title is Centralization in Internet Standards. There we go. So the purpose and a bit of the history here. This was inspired by a draft that Brian Trammell and I started when we were both on the IAB about choke points on the internet before this became quite such a big topic. And it never really got enough steam to actually be adopted by the IAB. We talked about it once or twice, I think. But the topic stayed with me, and as we went on, I thought I wanted to write more about it. So here we are. And I very much want to keep the focus here on exploring how centralization relates to the internet standards community in our work. There is a lot more that can be talked about here, and I know that it's something we return to fairly often around competition and economic factors and so forth and so on. But we lack expertise and authority in those areas. And in a lot of cases, and one of the main points of the draft is that, you know, while we see centralization happening, we don't necessarily have the ability to prevent it with the tools that we have in our toolbox. But having said that, there are still things we can do, and so that's kind of the area that the draft is trying to stake out and talk about. Oh, I see. Okay. So this is the current table of contents. It starts by trying to define centralization with the American spelling. It tries to talk about why it's not a great thing to have centralized internet protocols, why we're trying to avoid it. And then it offers a kind of a taxonomy of centralization of different kinds that we've observed. This is, as far as I'm aware, original. I haven't seen anyone else do this, and as the next slide says, I haven't gotten a lot of feedback on this, which means either I got it great the first go or people haven't really looked at it. I'm not sure which. So if folks have thoughts about that, I'd love to hear it offline. Then it talks about kind of, you know, there are some common conceptions about how decentralization can be brought by using certain techniques, and it talks through why they are not magic bullets that can be used to solve centralization issues. And then it concludes with a discussion of what we in this community, you know, might think about doing, and like makes a couple of recommendations, or at least explores a couple of areas where, you know, that are suggestions of how to guide that discussion. So far, all the interactions that I've had, a lot of them have been private, but it seems like there's pretty strong and broad interest in the topic. And I've had a fair amount of encouragement to pursue this work, which has kept me revising it about once a month right now. I've made a lot of tweaks and adjustments throughout based upon the feedback I've received. And I think, as I mentioned, I haven't had a lot of substantial suggestions around the cons of centralization, but a lot of the discussion has been around what should internet standards do, and I think that needs some more development. And I realized when I was putting these slides together, I need to update the acknowledgement section as well. So next steps, my gut feeling is we're something like 75% of the way there. We could spend a lot of time working in this area generally, but I'd like to ship something. And so I have some open issues. I'm getting some feedback still. I saw Yari gave some feedback, which was quite interesting just about an hour ago, which I think I'm going to enjoy talking through with him and incorporating in the document. Right now, my plan is to submit it to the independent stream, and I've been talking to the ISC about that a little bit. But I do want to incorporate more review and feedback from the community and publish that relatively soon. So that's the first URL is the repo that I'm using to develop this. Issues and discussion there is more than welcome. And so far, the public discussions happened on Architecture Discuss. If the IB is happy to continue that, I'm happy to continue to use that, or I can try and get another mailing list if the IB doesn't want me to do that. And that's all I've got.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for the update. No, I think this is definitely a good mailing list to use.
Okay.
Same
Thanks.
thing. We take Yari. He has like 1 or 2 more slides, and then we take the queue. So you can unmute anytime again, Mark, or as soon as we have the questions. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you display my one slide, there's only one actual slide. This will be brief, so we have some time for discussion. So very much in the same vein as Mark was talking about now. So this is about the technical things that, if you can go to the next slide, technical things that we could do about some aspects of centralization. And I don't want to go into the details of this, but just wanted to highlight that there's like two categories that the IAB or groups around the IAB have talked about in recent times. One is data and how that gets accumulated in smaller number of hands, and what can we do about that. And the other one is various kinds of linkages. How do you bundle OS or device or browser and some application systems, some services together, and how you find the different components and how tight those bindings are. And there are things you can do about this. Just to list on the right side a few things that the IETF has recently worked on. So for data, for instance, oblivious DNS or PPM type of solutions are one approach. Of course, we can also try and eliminate some of the data, don't send as much data, but there's other tools as well. And then for these two tight bindings, you have discovery and modularity that you can apply, and DDR is one good example of that coming out of the ADD working group. So I think that's it for now. You can look at the slide in more detail, and we can go to discussion. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, actually, Yari, Mark, and Beat, if you just want to stay there, put your video on, and we start the discussion. We start the queue. Christian.
Thank you, Van. I've been following your work for some time, and it's great. And I'd like to see that work published. I mean, I'd like to see that work given as much visibility as we can. The one thing I'd like to be clear about is whether we should measure CDN concentration by itself or as a part of the web delivery process. When I do my own measurements, which are not as extensive as yours, I do see, for example, that if you look at the top sites, one of the biggest provider for the top sites is Wikipedia, because Wikipedia has an infrastructure that covers many countries, et cetera, and it becomes very visible. Now, that kind of stuff, I mean, a big organization like Wikipedia, but the same is true for Facebook or Google or Microsoft or many others, is also a delivery mechanism which actually competes with the various CDNs with some kind of a closed market. So I was wondering whether we should also assess the importance of stuff like that. And so I don't know if you want that. So that was one question. And the other question is that, yes, I mean, we have to go into this publication, assess also the role of platforms. We see the concentration happening in the underlying platforms. I mean, the place where the hosts are, I mean, being DNS providers, virtual network, virtual machine providers, etc. That's also something we should publish.
Yeah, thank you, Christian. I think that wasn't really a question, right?
Well, no, the question is basically how do we define these things like CDN?
Yeah, so no, it's not a question to answer. It's an open question for the community. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Then we take the next in the queue.
Hi, and thanks for the presentations. Prior to Mark's draft, Mark McFadden, myself, and Elliot have a draft. It's still out there, revision 3 on centralization as well. So I was thinking one way forward would be to have a reconciliation or have a look at both of our drafts together and maybe see where each of us can fill in the holes. And that's just something to think about going forward. I'll post the link here and also on the mailing list. The other thing I just wanted to bring up, just more generally, maybe perhaps following on from Yari's presentation, is that Stephen in SAG mentioned consolidation around protocols that are going from 2 to 3 different protocols. And that's something that I don't think has been looked at yet in terms of standardization here at the IETF. So it's just another thought for something we can put together on all these drafts. So thanks a lot.
Thank you. Elliot.
Hi again. All right, a couple of things now. First of all, I think my name has fallen off that draft, Dominique. I had hoped to actually contribute it, but for various reasons, mostly involving the RFC update process and a few other things, I ran out of time and steam at the time that it was going. The other point I just wanted to make is really channeling Colin here, in that there was a workshop last year in the DIN-RG. There was a workshop on centralization in the internet. I will post the link into the chat. It's probably good for anybody who's interested in this topic to take a look at the presentations there. And I'll just end with, while Mark and I have indeed been talking, regardless of whether we decide to go forward in the independent stream, if we do, I'm certainly hoping that that wouldn't be the end of the conversation, but more to spur additional conversation, both in the IETF and elsewhere. This is a topic where TPRC and WISE and many other places where there are policy implications, economics considerations. This is something where I think we should reach across in order to form better shared understanding. Thank you.
Yes, hi, Vittorio Bertola. Well, I just wanted to suggest that the IAB takes a look at what I think is one of the key issues that are open around this centralization thing. There are many aspects, but the one that I've seen coming up around and around, in the end, in different forms, is the relationship between the applications and the network. There's a draft also in the list, not in these three ones, but it was in the agenda before, on exchanging signals between between applications and the network. And this is really the key point, because in the end, I mean, in the last 10 years, we've seen this trend that has brought forward centralization by taking functionalities that were traditionally provided by the network, by, let's say, thousands of ISPs globally, if you look at the global space, hundreds of thousands of corporates that were providing network access, and 200 different governments scattered around the world. And now these functions are being centralized into the hands of 4 browser makers, 2 mobile operating system makers, and I mean, in terms of messaging, maybe 3, 4, 5 companies. So globally, this is really one of the reasons why we're seeing this centralization. And we're getting more and more of it as soon as we continue moving functionalities from the network to the application level. So there should be an IETF position, an IETF idea of, in the end, where do we see in the long term the relationship between the applications and the network to be? If any data on connections, on activities has to be shared from the applications with the network operator or not, under which conditions. And part of this will be a policy decision. So there will be, I'm sure there will be regulators involved in these, competition authorities. There's so many other aspects which are not technical. But at least if the IETF could come up with ways to do this communication when it's necessary, when in the end it will be decided that it's necessary to share information, and discussions on how to do it well rather than how to do it in a bad way, I think this could be a contribution to advance the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, as you said, the IAB is working on a document here. I see this mostly as a separate topic, but as you also said, there is a loose relation by this trend to move up the stack and then having less players. And there are pros and cons of that. Okay, PHP.
Hi, yes. Centralization is the frame that we've received, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that is the right frame through which we should be looking at this problem. I don't worry about centralization itself. I worry about walled gardens, and I worry about switching costs. If I can switch from one vendor to another without having pain, without having stickiness, I don't care about the centralization so much. If I can talk to somebody who is using a different messaging format, I don't worry so much. On the social media side, I'm not that worried about the publication side of things. I'm worried about the curation side of things, because it is the curation power of Facebook that was abused to set an agenda that promoted a particular set of politics. And so I think that we've got to be rather skeptical of the frame that we're given and address the real frames. And those are actually the ones that we can do something about. We don't do economics here, but we do interoperable. We could make internet accounts portable, so you could take your email account from one vendor to another. And we could have a decentralized curation capability. RSS was originally designed for that.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is very much the point of the discussion, to figure out what we in this community could be doing and how we can move forward. We have Carl in the queue, who was supposed to present a few slides from ISOC, but now he's here, and so go ahead, Carl.
Yes, thank you very much. And first of all, apologies for joining late. I had missed the time for jumping in. But I just wanted to flag that we've been working a little bit on this at the Internet Society for a few years, thinking about consolidation and centralization. And quite recently, we launched a what we call a focus area, kind of a thematic view on centralization on our Pulse platform, which is basically trying to curate information and data on different thematics, and one of them being centralization. And I won't go into much details about more about that background, more than to say that what we're doing there in the context of trying to break down this question of centralization, what we're looking at specifically in that focus area is around market concentration for the provision of certain or specific technologies for popular websites. So we're collaborating with a partner called W3 Tech that produces these web technology surveys, basically querying a website, looking at, for a given set of technologies, who are the providers involved. And then we calculate a market share on that basis. So the market share in this context is understood as the ratio of sites using a provider to all sites using that technology. And that is a bit of a mouthful, but effectively it means if you have a sample in which 20% of the websites uses, say, Cloudflare, then Cloudflare is given a 20% market share. And then we use those market shares to calculate concentration metrics, two of them, one of them being the Gini coefficient that you might be familiar with from other contexts like income inequality, and one of them being HHI. But the idea here is that we're interested in trying to come up with concentration measures for these different services, and importantly, kind of see where the trend is heading, in what direction are we going. So we launched this in December and is very much looking for feedback. We received some very useful feedback from many people in the IETF community already that we've incorporated, but we're definitely looking for more. So encourage everyone to have a look at that website, scrutinize what we're doing, and we very much welcome feedback to the pulse@isoc.org address. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Glad that you made it. I think this is a very valuable input to the discussion, and I think all what we heard today is just like the start of the discussion we need to have and we should have. So please go to the architecture discuss mailing list or contact the IAB directly. We are at time, but Mark and Viet, as you're still here, if you want to add something or say something, we have a few seconds. No, okay, so then was great to have you here. Thank you everybody for contributing to this discussion. Again, this is the start of the discussion, not the end, hopefully. and I wish you a good remaining week.
You're mentally already. Get out until Saturday.
I'll meet you over. I'll meet you over in that area.